Hey everybody, this is our first set of notes for American democracy. We're going to start to look at the foundations of American government. What is government? Why do we have government? And what happened to get us the current government we have today? So you see this quote, what is government? We're going to talk about this in class. If men were angels, there would be no need for government. Now obviously men are not angels, and therefore we need some sort of constraint and also the goods and services and keeping society functioning. So let's take a look at what government is. Okay, so we looked at this in class, providing order, protecting citizens, trying to look out for the common good, enforcing policy, and really rules to live by. You know, you think about, students always say anarchy sounds pretty good. Yeah, I don't think so. And we'll talk about why we need a government. But really the role of the government, how far it should go, is really up to debate even to this day. So we're going to go back to our American foundings, and we're going to think back to the colonial period. So this isn't a history course, so we're going to really breeze through this history part of this. So going back to the colonial period, people from Western Europe, England, Spain, France, Sweden, and primarily English, coming in to the present-day United States. Why? Personal freedom, religious freedom. Some people are coming here to make money. Some people get kicked out of their countries. Some are prisoners. So a whole lot of reasons people are coming to the present-day United States and setting up these 13 colonies. Okay, so this is really where some of the foundations of our American government come from. So you think about these three basic concepts of government, and we're going to have this to this present day. So first thing, government should be ordered. Okay, you have to have some sort of organization, some sort of regulation for people to follow. Okay, this we're going to see in all of the 13 colonies, but also it needs to be limited. Limited government is one of our founding principles. The government cannot and should not and will not be all-powerful. There has to be limits on that government, what it can do, what it cannot do, and government needs to serve and represent the people. Okay, so these three ideas, you need to have some sort of order. It's not all-powerful, and it represents the people, are really the founding basic governmental principles that we'll see throughout American history and the history of government in our country. Okay, so again, going back to colonial period, the British controlling the East Coast here, okay, from Maine down to Georgia, okay, you're several thousand miles away. So this is going to create some issues, okay, and as the colonies start to develop their sort of independence, issues arise. And again, this isn't a history class, but we're getting us up to the what happened in terms of the government and the politics. So pretty much up to 1760, I know it's kind of behind here, the colonies were pretty much left alone for the most part. They got to set up their own government. They're 3,000 miles away. It takes 2 months to get there by ship. And really the colonies are providing England with money and resources, but they're pretty much just kind of left alone for the most part. Okay, this sense of independence is going to foster into the American independence movement and then the Revolutionary War. But up to 1760, they're pretty much left alone. Now, after 1760, we're going to have the French and Indian War, and then King George III takes control and inherits a lot of debt. Okay, wars are expensive, and as this, as the colonies are really the mother country, England, goes into debt, they're going to look for new ways to gain income, and that's going to come from taxes and restrictions. And as these restrictions come into play, the colonists are going to feel that they're not being represented, which is one of those three, and the government is not being limited enough, which will lead us into the independence movement. Okay, so some of these early principles are put forth here by a man named John Locke. All right, all people are born free, equal, independent. And this here, people have the right to give consent. People have to give consent to their government. Okay, the government just doesn't have that right from God. People give that right to govern to the government. And if the government fails to protect these rights, the people change the government. And this is going to really lead into the Declaration of Independence. And we'll come back to what this means today. You know, if you don't like a law, if you don't like, school board policy, if you don't like school policy, what can you do about it? How do you change the government? Okay, so as the colonists start to unite, and we're going to see some of these acts, you know, the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act. Again, this is not a history class. We'll see the colonists come together and really start to cry out, you know, they don't have representation. So you can't tax us without representation. Okay. And as they start to vocalize this, British government and the king starts to pay attention. Okay. And you think about why we pay taxes. You know, you or your parents, or if you're 18, you have a voice, okay? And you pay money to the government. And then the government represents you and they provide services for you. And the colonists are feeling that they are not being represented. So they're going to fight back. And you think about how the colonists are going to go about this. And we'll come back to this, and this will be something important that you're going to want to write down. The first thing, written protest to the king. They're going to complain. The king is not open to negotiation on a lot of these things. And as this does not work, they're going to start to organize boycotts. It works a little bit, but overall, you know, England is not going to, you know, give up control. Okay, so first, you know, you complain, talk, protest. Second, do something. And then when the colonists feel they have no more choice left, will lead to violence and frustration, and we'll have the Revolutionary War. Okay, so you see, you know, the tar and feathering, and we'll see governors' houses ransacked and burned down, and vandalism. You know, you have the Boston Massacre, or the 5 colonists being killed, the Boston Tea Party, millions of dollars of tea, British tea, thrown over into the Boston Harbor. Okay, and as this is coming together, the colonists are starting to realize that we need to organize, and they're going to create something called the First and Second Continental Congress, where they are going to come together during the war, and the Revolutionary War breaks out in 1775. So again, still a year before the Declaration of Independence. Okay, and they're going to set up a Congress, really, that one state, one vote. Okay, and we'll come back to this a lot when we get to the Constitution. Okay, and really seen as a way to voice their opinion and be represented, each colony. Okay, so 1776, the colonists going through this whole process and going to tell the world that they no longer are a British colony. And we'll look at this more and really what this means and why this is important, and how this ties into this idea where the government gets its power from the people. And if the people don't like what the government's doing, then they have some options. Okay, so really just the foundational principles. We'll talk about this in class. Tomorrow we'll get into the first state governments, and we'll continue from there. All right, see you guys.